Absolutely no international sanctions and no British laws are being broken in the course of this programme. And a big thanks to Yuri and his good wife, who have made their workers' apartment available to us en route back to Moscow. I hope everything works on our side, but everything on the Russian side is working like clockwork. Keir Starmer's announcement, which came at exactly the same time as two of our colonies where we sent many a criminal back in the day, Australia and Canada, that they are recognising the Palestinian state, came as no surprise. Certainly not to Benjamin Netanyahu, who promptly met it with the most ferocious announcement that there will never be a Palestinian state, and that he was redoubling the effort to settle with settler Jews from all around the world, the area he calls Judea and Samaria and the rest of us call the West Bank. There will be no Palestinian state at all, he said. I have doubled the number of Jewish settlers and I'm going to double it again. So in the light of that, the British, Australians, Canadians and anyone else that's paying attention really has only two choices. Either they have to de-recognise the occupying power that is brazenly refusing to allow the Palestinian state, which these governments have solemnly and bindingly declared recognised states, or it's all just a ruse. And my money is on that. My money is on that this is a carefully crafted conspiracy between them all to try to show their resurgent electorates that are rejecting all of them in ever increasing numbers, that they are at least doing something to try and bring about an end to what any sensible person long ago accepted was a genocidal, frenzied Holocaust that has cost the lives of many hundreds of thousands of defenseless refugees, most of them women and children, and half of them children under the age of 5. Most people regard that as pretty much a Holocaust. Although the Pope has not yet said he's ready to accept that it's a Holocaust, neither has Emmanuel Macron, and neither has Keir Starmer or Mark Carney, or whatever his name is, the Prime Minister of Australia. None of them have done anything to rein in Benjamin Netanyahu. To the contrary, they have given him, over the whole of the last 2 years, unlimited, bottomless, absolutely fathomless diplomatic support and cover. Cover on every level. Cover on the level of participating in European football championships, in the World Cup, in the Eurovision Song Contest, sending him weapons, sending him money, giving him privileged access to their markets, whilst at the same time they now want you to believe they support the concept of a Palestinian state. I've got news for them. They already accepted the Palestinian state when they, all of them, including the United States, accepted the Oslo Agreement, which became the property of the world through the Security Council after it was signed on the White House lawn. That was well over 30 years ago, and absolutely nothing has been done to bring it about, and absolutely everything has been done to facilitate the demographic, topographic changes in the areas that were supposed to be the Palestinian state, so that if it ever came about, it would have none of the properties that are required for a functioning state. Which state are they recognizing? What are its boundaries? Well, they daren't say that, of course, because Netanyahu's already told them he has eaten, with 800,000 settlers, the best parts of the territory of the West Bank that was supposed to be the Palestinian state. And everybody knows now that the Gaza Strip has been subjected to Hiroshima ×3 or even ×5 and is no longer fit for the purpose of being a part of a Palestinian state. In any case, they openly discussed turning it into the biggest real estate deal of the century. Donald Trump has tasked Tony Blair and his son-in-law, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, with the task of turning it into a parade of condominiums, brothels, casinos, Trump towers, and all the other paraphernalia that people like them require for their vacations. So if there's no Gaza, and if the West Bank has already been eaten and is about to be eaten twice over, what is this Palestinian state that they are now requiring? Well, we know at least one thing about it, and that is that the British, Canadians, and the Australians, in synchronicity, perfect, synchronized swimming in the grief of the Palestinian people, have already picked its government, or rather picked who will not be allowed to be in its government. It's a strange kind of recognition of an independent state when the colonizing countries dictate to the people of the colony who they might be allowed to choose as their government. But then that's always been the British way on this subject of Palestine. Britain, you'll have heard me say before, gave Palestine away in 1917 before they even possessed it. On behalf of one people, Mr. Balfour promised a second people based in Europe and the United States, the Zionist movement led by Lord Rothschild, the land that belonged to a third people and which the British did not even possess as a colony before they gave it away. So I suppose it's not that great a leap that the British are now saying, well, we'll recognize a Palestinian state which has no territory, has no boundaries, will not be allowed to have any military capability whatsoever, and in whose territory the Israeli state will have full rights to, quote, go after, unquote, anybody that they designate as an enemy of Israel. It's all academic, as Mr. Netanyahu told you when he gets back from America, where he's now on his 4th visit in 8 months, proving my thesis, controversial thesis, that Israel has in fact become the 51st state of the United States. He's going to address it, but he's told you there will be no Palestinian state. I don't know what Donald Trump sees in Benjamin Netanyahu. He sees him more often than he sees Melania, it seems to me. But whatever it is, whatever they've got going on between them, it sure needs a lot of FaceTime. No long-distance relationship for Donald and Benny. No telephone sex at nights. It's got to be face-to-face, close-up and personal. And there may be sex involved, though not necessarily sex between Donald and Benny. Sex is a big topic in the United States. The Epstein files continue to provide an absolute treasure trove of information, damaging and embarrassing information, about so far largely unnamed individuals. We only know about the Epstein files because a very heroic Congressman, Thomas Massey of Kentucky, is standing up on the floor of the US Congress and reading out the goods, though only one name so far. But there have been casualties. Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, formerly of the British parish, who was a close confidant of the British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and who is now back in power, along with Mr. Tony Blair, behind the back of Keir Starmer, whose strings they appear to work. Peter Mandelson was the British ambassador in Washington. Many of us, me included, on this show included, warned him that it could all only end in tears, and so it has. But Mr. Mandelson's tears famously dry quickly. After all, this is the third time that he has been sacked by a Labour Prime Minister from a great office of state. Mr. Mandelson quickly moves into revenge mode. I know him. I've known him well for almost 40 years. I know his modus operandi. And I know that the story in every British newspaper today about Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff came from Peter Mandelson. I know that this story is a part of a civil war currently taking place in the British government to force Keir Starmer out of office. Now, they're not short of ammunition. They didn't require the sacking of Peter Mandelson in order to give them approximate reason for getting rid of Keir Starmer. The main reason is that the Labour Party is currently at an historic low. I mean since its foundation. I mean in 125 years. The Labour Party is facing electoral oblivion. In fact, it faces it every Thursday night in virtually every local government by-election up and down the length and breadth of the country. And Labour MPs care about one thing more than they care about anything else, including their families. And that is to remain as MPs, to remain as members of Parliament. And they now know that Keir Starmer is leading them to electoral oblivion. So Peter Mandelson's got a candidate. He's a very close confidant, and his name is Wes Streeting. He is the man that the Blairites have earmarked as the next Prime Minister of Britain. Foreign viewers will never have heard of him. Most people in Britain wish that they had never have heard of him. And if it wasn't for the Green Party, he wouldn't even be in Parliament and thus not a part of this conversation. They refused to stand down when an independent, socialist, young Muslim woman stood against him, came within 500 votes of defeating him, with the Green Party refusing to stand down, polling a miserable 1,500 votes or so, which if they had, as they would most likely have, gone to the Independent, would have seen the end of Wes Streeting. But alas, you're going to have to get used to that name and that face and the kind of politics that he represents. So, more of that later when I speak to the Honourable Craig Murray, the former British ambassador, writer and activist, later in the show. Now, are you following Donald Trump? Did you know that he had solved the war between Azerbaijan and Sweden, or wherever it was? He said Azerbaijan, wherever it is, was fighting. Did you know that today he compounded it and said that he had solved the war between Azerbaijan and Cambodia? Not Sweden, but Cambodia, not Holland or any of the other errors that he has been making. I was wondering whether Donald Trump had lost his marbles. And then when I read his overnight pronunciamento that really bad things are going to happen to the country of Afghanistan unless they agree to give back to the people who built it, the Bagram Air Base, once a torture chamber during the so-called War on Terror, and from which the United States fled during the presidency of Joe Biden in the most humiliating way it's possible to imagine, leaving behind $1 billion or so of military hardware, helicopters, guns, ammunition, all of which fell into the grateful hands of the Taliban, who only had sandals and only had Kalashnikovs before they got the treasure of Bagram Air Base. Now, there's a couple of problems with President Trump's latest promise. The first one is that if the Afghans give Bagram Air Base back to the people who built it, they'll be giving it back to Moscow, to President Putin, because Bagram Air Base was built by the Russians. Donald Trump doesn't seem to have a better grasp of history than he does of geography and of the 9 or is it 10 wars that he has brought to an end in the last 8 months in his dogged pursuit of the Nobel War Prize. Well, the Afghans have given a very short shrift to President Trump. They've said, if you want the Bagram Air Base back, we are prepared to fight you for another 20 years for it. And that's problem number 2, because the United States would be lucky in current circumstances with a resurgent Russia on the borders, with a heavily armed Iran on the borders, with an impeccably turned out China on the borders, and with a Pakistan that has just concluded a nuclear-armed defense pact with Saudi Arabia to guard Saudi Arabia against any putative US and Israeli attack. The United States will be lucky even to be able to get in to Afghanistan. Never mind to be able to recapture the Bagram Air Base, still less to be able to hold it once it was besieged by hundreds of thousands of Afghan tribesmen, no longer in sandals, but in American military boots taken from Bagram, and no longer armed only with Kalashnikovs, but with military jets and military helicopters. All of this matters because Donald Trump is basically shooting people all over the world. He has now boasted that he has shot a third boat full of fishermen, if you believe the Venezuelans, or full of drug smugglers, if you believe Donald Trump. And let's face it, Donald Trump knows a drug smuggler when he sees one. A third civilian boat has been eviscerated, obliterated from the skies by the United States military. He's now threatening to fight the Taliban again. He has repeatedly and is threatening to again attack the Yemen. He is quite likely to be meeting Netanyahu this very day to discuss another Israeli attack on Iran. He is ready to assume sovereignty over the Gaza Strip, which will bring American forces directly into conflict with the Palestinian resistance there. And his friends have just massacred yet another huge family in the south of Lebanon. So if a man that may have lost his marbles is carrying around a nuclear football, we've got to wonder whether we need to stay in Russia in this fine workers' apartment, or whether it's safe to come home. It's all coming up in the course of the next 2 hours or so, because it is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.